Okay, cool. My name's Simone Bennett. I'm a principal consultant at Arcana. Normally I don't like to stand behind the lectern, but I don't have a clicky thing, so we'll just be doing these guys. I'm from sunny Brisbane, so thanks for having me in your beautiful town, but my colleague Ryan said I should put some mud and sticks in my hair and say I'm from flooding Brisbane, and then you guys would all be super nice to me because you feel bad. That's still flooding there now. It's crazy. Although it was just raining before, so maybe I brought it with me. You're welcome. We're here today to talk about why landing zones matter, what they are, do you need one, yes, and how to build one. So hopefully everybody here uses Azure, or you just don't care about platform engineering. That's fine too. So there's two things when you talk about landing zones. I just want to quickly clear this up. When I started working with Microsoft and Azure Landing Zones, there was Cloud Adoption Framework, well-architected framework, and I couldn't quite understand how they were different because a lot of the stuff overlaps. Cloud Adoption Framework is your cloud journey, everything, designing how you're going to get to the cloud, who's going to do what in your team, what's going to move, what's going to be replaced. And well-architected framework is like optimizing a single stack of workload within your cloud. So if you've heard those two terms and you don't know what they mean, then that's what they mean. Also, the speaker room's like a kilometre from here, and I just had to run, so now I'm like all puffed. So bear with me. I'm not a big runner. This is the Cloud Adoption Framework, right? So this is where we talk about defining strategy. Yes, defining strategy, planning it, getting ready, adopting it, and then this continuous govern and manage phase. And most of the customers I've ever worked with in cloud journey or any other migration journey, they just skip straight to that ready, adopt, and they just put stuff in the cloud, right? There's no thought about what happens after that or what happens before that. They just put it in the cloud. And sometimes they don't get a great outcome, and then they say, oh, Azure's terrible. And it's like, well, it's what you build, just like anything else. And the common things I've seen throughout my entire career is things like technical debt as your cloud grows organically. So you might have worked with someone, or your organization might have every VNet has a 10.0.0.0/ subnet, so you actually can't, give anyone their own IP range anymore, or you haven't thought about how the network's going to go, or you start hitting scalability limits within the subscription, so you can only use so many of a resource, and suddenly you can't deploy the resource because somebody else has used them all within that one subscription. There's no boundary between workloads, so you might have all your same stuff in the same subscription as me, and I do some crazy thing and it damages your workload because we're just all sharing the one little area. And then things like accidental resource destruction, like I delete my resource group or I deactivate my subscription and I don't realize you're using a thing in it, and then suddenly your stuff's broken, and then we're like, who did it? The whole whodunit thing. And then oftentimes I see customers get to the point where they're like, we just have to start over and rebuild. And then the migration process from subscriptions into like a new landing zone is sometimes quite painful. There's definitely stuff that can move, but there's stuff that has to be rebuilt. I'm not sure if anyone has experienced that. I don't love audience participation when I'm in the audience, but feel free to interact if that's your jam. So I used this one in my WAF talk and I got the lulz in Melbourne, so I just wanted a place to put it. But generally I find it's not because anyone's incompetent or they purposely build in complex environments, it's just that in the olden days you got really clear guidance. If you built Exchange, if you built VMware, there was a clear guidance on what to build. And you just knew if you followed those instructions, you'd have a best practices environment and you'd be fine. But with cloud, it's like, it depends. We're everything to everyone. You can build whatever you like. But with that means you somehow have to know everything about everything, and you don't know if you're building the right thing. So lots of teams just continued as they had on-prem, and then they have these bad results in the cloud where they've got sprawl or workloads that cost a lot more than they expected, or performance issues and all that kind of stuff. And a few years ago, I worked at Microsoft. When I started there, everyone was talking about landing zones, and I was like, I didn't want to ask what that was because you hear it a lot, but I didn't realize I was building them already. I just wasn't calling them landing zones. So I thought, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we'll quickly cover what they are. And it's this. This is landing zones. And this is what people look at, the Docker, and they see this, and they just generally nope out from there. And they just go, I'm just going to continue what I'm doing, right? Because that's crazy. But we'll break it down. It's actually not that bad. There's 8 core areas when we're talking about landing zones. And they are, also hopefully you can see the line because I was too tired this morning to change the colour, and it's yellow, so hopefully you can see it, if there's colourblind people in the audience. So we have the Entra tenant, so that's where you have your billing. Generally, every company would just need one tenant, right? There's a very rare occurrence where you'd need multi-tenant. I'm sure there are occurrences, but if you think of the old domain controller days, if you think about it as your forest, you need one forest. And if you've ever had to manage a multi-forest trust, it's a nightmare. Just one forest is usually plenty. So you'd have one tenant generally with all your billing profiles and stuff. Then you have your identity and access management built in there. And you can see there's an identity subscription and then some identity resources because Azure does identity in a bunch of different places, as you surely know. Then we have the management group and subscription organization. So in the olden days, that was like group policy. Or if you think about putting those subscriptions into folders and then applying permissions and guardrails and policy down into those folders, that's how we group our subscriptions. And then we have network connectivity, so that's like your hub and spoke network, or you might have isolated networks depending on your requirements and what audits and stuff you have to go through. We have security and management. Again, in the Microsoft implementation, they have it in their own subscription. So a subscription's its own little boundary, so they put it all in there so the security team can just manage their stuff. We have governance and guardrails and monitoring, and you can see that's actually on every picture there, which doesn't help make the diagram look less complicated, but each of those little things at the bottom is all the governance, like budgets, policy, monitoring, alerting, all that kind of stuff. And then you've got platform automation and DevOps, which most people hopefully are doing now, but I still talk to clients who are like, why do I even need that? And if you want to talk about that, we don't have time for tangents today, but come and see me, and I'll happily convince you that you need to do that. And then Microsoft now, the new advice that came out this year is that they divide those subscriptions or those learning zones into platform learning zones and application learning zones. So platform learning zones are those connectivity, identity management. They're the central, if you think about having a shared services environment or a shared services team, the stuff that every team would use, like you're all going to use a hub and spoke network and you might all share the one firewall. And then application learning zones are where you put your applications and your workloads, right? So if we look at the picture and we break it down, these are the platform learning zones, connectivity, identity management. And then these are examples they've put in of platforms. So there's one there for a SaaS application. Oh, I can't turn my head. There's one there for a SaaS application, and there's one here for a very complicated workload. So they're a subscription, and they would call them application learning zones. And you would put different stuff into those by default. But there's something that I just find it's still too complicated even when you break it down, right? It's a mammoth diagram. It makes people afraid. And then it's really hard to convince your teams to work on it or adopt it. So at Arcana, I'll show you how we do it to make it a bit more simple. These are the management groups. And so you saw them in the other diagram, but we just have the management groups in our diagrams. And that's where we will put our subscriptions inside. We follow the Cloud Adoption Framework guidance. It just doesn't have all the extra noise in the diagram there. Then we have connectivity, identity, and management. And maybe you'd have on-premises ID. Sometimes customers have, Active Directory on-prem and you connect it in. For our smaller SMB or ISV customers that are never going to be gigantic and they don't want to be multinationals, they don't really need 3 or 4 subscriptions for this. So you're meant to have a subscription per workload management team. So if you think about, I need to give a team permissions to resources, then you might put those resources in a subscription of their own. But if it's the same team of 3 developers who are building the applications and managing the environment, you probably just need 1 subscription for your core resources and then subscriptions for each application outside of that, just to avoid the limits and resource constraints. So in most of our deployments, there's a bit of a debate with the Microsoft teams about it, but in our deployments, we put all of that stuff generally into 1 subscription altogether. Hopefully it's not too small. And then we have a governance layer. So you know how I showed you the governance layer? We have that too. We have policy, we have cost alerts, we have budgets, we have monitoring, security, log analytics, all that kind of stuff built in across all of the subscriptions that we deploy. And then we have our application subscriptions. So in each one of those, we use subscription vending, which I'll get to in a second, to vend everything you need to build your application. So they're the application subscriptions there. And when you put it together, you've got a fully baked environment. That's the same diagram that the Microsoft Docker has, just without all the noise. So it's a lot less terrifying, right, when you look at it like that. And then you can use things like your dev test subscriptions in your sandbox management group to use cheap stuff, but don't put them in prod. But you can, make use of all those MSDNs or the dev test pricing. And then you put all your applications into application landing zones, and you're good to go. How do you get those application landing zones? We use subscription vending. That's from Microsoft, from the Cloud Adoption Framework team. I was distracted by the Photographer, I never know what to do. And then every photo I look like, Actually, I was really determined today to get a good photo, but I ruined it already. Yeah, so subscription vending, we use that. So it's its own repo in our environment, and you can use the Microsoft tools for this. Our customers fill out the vars file because we use Terraform. You can use whatever you like. And it vends a subscription. So it creates a subscription, it puts action group in there, it puts Terraform state storage, it puts managed identities that you use for your GitHub setup, all the things you need to just give it to the team so they can build their application and get going. All that base infrastructure, it's peered to the core network, it uses a firewall, it's got access to the front door, all that kind of stuff. And so this is what the journey looks like if you follow the cloud adoption framework. If you can get past the diagram, this is what the journey should look like. You create the subscriptions for your platform. You create the platform using the Bicep, Terraform, or I think there's even a portal model, which we don't want. Where's the red thumb? But use infrastructure as code. And then we use subscription vending to vend subscriptions. So we stamp out subscriptions with everything our customers need, and they can just stamp them out as required, or they can destroy them as required. So they might spin one up and then take it down, and then they deploy their workloads. And you can use the Microsoft accelerators for that. There's a bunch, there's like an AVD one and an AI one, there's accelerators. I'm pretty sure the gentleman next door is talking about them right now. But there's like the Azure CLI, there's the Azure, the AZD, the developer one. Anyway, you can use all that stuff to get your workload. And then I can see you're all not convinced. Do I really need a learning zone? That still looks really complicated. Is anyone not convinced? Oh, you're all convinced. Well, we can skip these slides. Anyway, so organic growth is not sustainable, it's costly, it's hard to retrofit, it's not scalable. And if you want a consistent framework for governance and security and scalability, you need to think about that early, put that in place now, and then as you grow, there's no rework required. I can't even match the meme game of those guys before, but anyway, I didn't realize it was going to be such a meme-heavy conference. But how do you get started? Let's have a look at that. So this is those Terraform pattern modules I was telling you about. And this is where the subscription vending, this is where those modules for connectivity, identity management come from. We didn't write them from scratch. We used the Cloud Adoption Framework team's work. And they are constantly updating them. You can log issues on their repo. They're very responsive. There's a Bicep one, which I'm showing you here. And then there's a Terraform one as well. So you can be Team Bicep or Team Terraform. It's totally up to you. And then that's the same place you can find all those workload modules. So they've got pattern modules, which take a bunch of small modules and click them together to build AVD. Or you can just use the single smaller modules, like I need a key vault, and you just use the module from there. The good thing about the AVM, Azure Verified modules, is that someone from the product team at Microsoft has to sort of work on it and own it, so you know it's going to have best practices by default, and it's updated, and they sort of make sure if something's deprecated, it gets removed, and it's not like it's open source, but it's not just open source to the community, it's owned by the Microsoft teams. And then you're like, that's still too hard, I feel you. But that's okay. So there's a great tool from the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework team, which I love. And you should check it out. The link is there, but if you just search for Terraform Accelerator. I think there's one for Bicep, but I'm Team Terraform, so I don't know. But you go in, you run this PowerShell script, you fill out some values. For example, here I'm putting like the subscription ID. I'm putting the same one for each because I want all of my stuff to go into my one MSDN subscription. You put in like the name of your org and all the other things it needs to build your whole landing zone, and it will go ahead and create the code for you. And in a second, it will give me a plan file. And if you use Terraform, you'll know all the little green pluses in the plan file mean it's things it's going to create. So you can see in here, they're green. It's going to create a network. It's going to create a firewall. It's going to create storage accounts and key vaults and all that kind of stuff that needs to build that entire landing zone that's in the diagram. But it doesn't just do that. It also goes ahead and creates you a repo in GitHub. So it puts all the code in GitHub for you. It creates the managed identities that you need to access it and run OIDC. And then all the code is there for you in GitHub. So now you've got your landing zone and you can edit it and you can change it as required, or you can build on top of it. So you don't just have the old portal accelerator for landing zone just deployed all this stuff. And then you were like, what is all this stuff? And I didn't even know what it was deploying half the time, especially in the policy. But it creates storage, it creates managed identities, it does everything it needs, puts it in GitHub, and then you've got a base there to go for and customize to your requirements. I couldn't find the storage account, but here we go, I'll find it. There, good. So that's the storage account for the Terraform state. The Bicep one I'm pretty sure is great as well, but I just personally haven't tried it out. Okay, cool. So you've got a landing zone, that's all good, and the tools from Microsoft are amazing, but the thing that's missing in my mind is that it's not entirely production ready. So you end up with this landing zone, you've got a network, you've got storage, you've got GitHub, you've got your stuff as code, but you can't just go and put an application straight into it because there's no monitoring or alerting. And this is the checklist that the Microsoft team suggests that you work through to get your stuff ready for production. So you can go ahead and build your dev test environment straight away and use it, but you wouldn't put your proper workloads in there. And so at Arcana, I just drew down on my sysadmin heritage and added all the things in that I figured that you need to be production ready. So we're talking about action groups for alerts and advisor alerts and platform logging and monitoring and backups that if you build a VM or you build a Kubernetes instance and it's not backed up, it will just back it up for 7 days, whether you like it or not. Budgets and budget alerts that go to the owner of the subscription, not somebody in finance, but someone who owns the workload. They'll get the alerts. They'll get the security alerts, they'll get the Azure advisor alerts. We put all the extra stuff in to make it a bit more usable around a firewall, and then we build a code space in GitHub so that customers don't need to install any tools for Terraform and stuff on their workstation. They can just use the code space to get started editing and creating things in their repo. And we end up with a fully baked landing zone like this, which is the diagram I showed you before. I fully rushed. I've got heaps of time. I'm going to go really slow now. No, if you're interested in landing zones, and a lot of people I talk to, especially customers, they don't know this exists, but the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework team has a monthly community call, and you can join the community call, and you can chat to them directly, and you can log issues on their repo, and then you can talk to them onto the community call. They'll also ask for advice on which way they're thinking of going. So right now they're asking for advice on whether they should use Azure RM or AZ API, for example, and you can weigh in and give that team your feedback directly, which is really new school because in the old days you just got what you got and you didn't get upset, So I definitely encourage you to check out the community call and stay up to date and get involved. I whipped through, so there'll be time for questions, but if you could please hit me up on LinkedIn or Blue Sky if you'd like to know more, if you want to know why you should do infrastructure as code, if interested in the well-architected framework, or if you'd like to check out Arcana's feature product, which is Feature Board for feature toggling, you can scan that code and get 50% off. Anybody? And also I would love feedback. I know this was a super fast talk and there was no time for side stories and jokes, which is disappointing if you came to my well-architected talk, I know. But if you could please give feedback on that QR code, I'd really appreciate it. If it's nice. And then the next talks are coming up. They're on the screen as well. Thanks.